Welcome, everyone. Thank you, all of you, for taking time to be here this evening. My name is Mark Hallett, and I'm Director of Grants Programs at Illinois Humanities, where I have now worked for nearly 10 years. One of my greatest pleasures has been being a small part of the Envisioning Justice initiative, which dates back to 2018. It is, as you know, I'm sure, now led by my wonderful colleague, Tony Pizarro. Since Envisioning Justice was begun, EJ, as we like to call it, has made to date more than 115 grants, totaling about $850,000. 86 of those grants to organizations, but 31 of them to individuals. We know the grants are small, but they also help people like you, I suppose, who are here tonight to carry out critical work. Next slide, please. So the mission of Envisioning Justice is to examine and re-examine the criminal legal system through the arts and through the humanities. Together, we leverage the arts and humanities to examine mass incarceration and to collectively shape a more just future. Our hope for this evening is that you will learn more about Envisioning Justice, of course, that you will meet fellow artists and humanists and others working in a similar vein to your own, but mainly that you'll come away with concrete thoughts on how to frame and describe your work to be able to apply to Illinois Humanities, but also to other funders for support for your work. The flow of this evening is pretty simple. This is meant to be a practical workshop to help walk participants through the EJ or Envisioning Justice Grant application process, sort of step by step. There will be a break or maybe a couple breaks, and there will be opportunities to meet with fellow attendees from across the state. And for all of this, you're going to be in really good hands. I do want to mention one other thing. One of our core tenets at Illinois Humanities, and perhaps particularly within Envisioning Justice, is the belief that we are all stronger together. What is the expression that nothing truly worthwhile was ever created in isolation? So working together simply brings more creative ideas, more hands to the table. This guides our work in EJ in general, as well as this evening. So there's going to be time for all of you to talk and to get to know one another. Everyone, and enjoy. And so to introduce our moderators, I want to turn things over to my amazing colleague, Tony. Tony?
Thank you, Mark, for your gracious and modest comments. Um, and thank you for the invocation. So as everyone is gathered today, this evening, we appreciate you signing up and spending part of your evening with us. As Mark stated, we go further together than we do alone. And we want to make sure that we are grounded in not only collaboration, but cross collaboration. We want to encourage people to share each other contact information as well as organization information. And really just want to really reiterate that Illinois Humanities is a statewide nonprofit with a mission to ensure all residents have access to the humanities. We believe the public humanities are critical for making the state more just, creative, and connected. We serve Illinois in three ways. Number one, through grants. Number two, through educational opportunities. And last but not least, public programming. Our programs are always free, and we focus on serving communities least likely to have access to the humanities. We hope you all stay involved and connected with Illinois Humanities beyond this grant workshop. Today, we have two wonderful, hardworking facilitators who are accomplished in their own rights. And I think that it is a privilege, not just an honor, but a privilege to have these two women to be leading this workshop. First, we have Dr. Keyria Rodgers. Her professional experience extends to 18 years in government program development and public policy, and 14 in higher education as a professor of criminal justice, public management, and policy. Next, we have the wonderful, awesome Judith McCray, who is a multiple Emmy Award winning broadcast journalist, documentary filmmaker, and a media activist with over 30 years in television and media production. I know a lot of you signed up expecting a two-part grant writing workshop. I would like to give you some context as to what you should expect throughout the evening. Rather than there being a part one and part two, our facilitators have decided to join together and present one cohesive, holistic grant writing workshop that will focus on telling your story and making your case. While this particular grant workshop will work through the Envisioning Justice grant application, the skills and the techniques you learn here today will be transferable to a Mellon grant application. It will be transferable to a MacArthur grant application. So you will be able to take what you learned today and apply it as you go out to seek other grant opportunities. At the end of this session, we will send you an email with grant resources that have opportunities outside of Illinois Humanities. There will be about 3 pages that you will receive in the email, along with this recording and your thank you of grant opportunities for funders who are looking to fund projects that deal with social justice work or work in this particular field as it pertains to the criminal justice system and social justice overall. And at this time, I give it to Judith McCray.
Thank you, Tony. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. Dr. Rodgers and I are both excited about working with you tonight till you have to actually have some hands-on opportunities to work with both your own narrative statement as well as budget. But rather than just focus on those 2 areas, we decided we really want to just walk very painstakingly, but not too painful, through the application process, not just for this, for the Envisioning Justice projects, but for anything you might be doing going forward, since there's some similarities throughout. So if you bear with me, I want to start with the first slide, please, in terms of this is like when the first part of the grant application. There we go. So the first thing you'll see when you're, well, I guess while this is coming up, is it can, and just by show of hands and when you press a little button on hand thingies, has everybody applied for a Envisioning Justice grant before? Or somebody has not? If you have not, put your hand up. Okay, okay. Everybody else is shy? No. Okay. Well, even if you have before, I think it's worth going through it, because as someone who's been writing grant applications myself for the last few years, I have found it's very, very important to respond exactly what you're being asked, because grants are applications determined by points. So whether you're coming in as an individual or as an organization, this is kind of the beginning in terms of getting prepared for what you have to have on hand. So as coming as an organization, you'll need your organization's name, department, center, or program, if it's applicable, the year you were founded, the number of full-time employees, number of part-time employees, number of volunteers, and any additional information that you want to include. You may not have answers to all of those, but you do need to put, even if it's number of full-time employees is 0, and you have 4, less than half part-time employees, you would respond to that there. As an individual application, your name of the project that you're wanting to do. How did you learn about this grant opportunity? Was a friend told you about it? You saw it on social media? Will you be using a fiscal sponsor? And by fiscal sponsor, that means if you are not your own 501c3 nonprofit charitable organization as certified by the IRS, you'll have to find an organization who does have that certification to then handle the budget, the receipt of the money, as well as how that is being documented and reported. So if you have a fiscal sponsor, which you'll need the fiscal sponsor's name, their address, their contact, their position, their email, and then their W-9 form, which means you'll have to have a fiscal sponsor lined up before you go proceed with this grant application or any grant application. And by the way, as we go through this, if you have questions, just put them in the chat, because we certainly can adjust your questions as we're going, as well as after the break. Before we go into the breakouts, you'll have a half hour to actually do some hands-on work in a small breakout with 3 other people. We'll also open for answer any questions as you're going through. So this is basically the list you should have in front of you when you're preparing to write a grant application. But again, if you have any questions about this at this time, you can either raise your hand or unmute yourself or put any questions or comments you have in the chat. Cool, then we'll go forward. Next slide, Dr. Rodgers.
All right, thank you so much, Judith. It's a pleasure to meet all of you and see all of you. And we're so excited about this. And so the next thing we're going to talk about, this is the annual operating budget. And this is really for like organizations who have that annual operating budget, or at least we hope that you do as you are, starting to think about what kind of grants you want to write for. So the first thing that you want to consider when thinking about the budget, if you're part of a college or a university, include your department's budget. Like we know that this is like a college and university, but like your department's budget. So for instance, when I was at a university, I worked for criminal justice and sociology. So that was my department budget. And then we also mentioned like the larger university budget too. And so additional comments, about the budget, think about this, right? How did you do? Like, how did your budget do in the previous years? How have you fared over the past year? You want to also consider like the past 12 months or the past 2 years or the past 3 years. Depending on the type of grant that you will apply for or write for, they will ask you that kind of information. That's all up to the funder and what it is that they're looking to basically see. They will ask questions like that because they also want to see what kind of history you have. Like it's the same thing as if you were giving out money, you would want to know what kind of history that you're of the person that you're giving money to as well, or agency that you're giving money to. Is your organization tax exempt? So again, 501c3 status is by far one of the best ways to apply for grants and receive funding. There are others as well, but this is one that you hear about the most. We also would like to encourage you to think about like your top 5 funders. This is the reason why on the grant applications that you will see from Illinois Humanities, we will ask you these things. Have you been funded by others? Why are we asking you that question? Because we also want to know, like, again, history. Have you experienced what it's like to receive money from others before? That means that you should at least have some indication of how to do reports, how to make sure that you can show that you're being fiscally responsible with any of the funding. So it's not like you're taking this grant and having a vacation going to Cancun, right? So we obviously don't want to do that. And so this is just the grantor's way of checking your status as well, because they also have people that they have to report to, and they want to make sure that they can report that they are funding agencies and individuals who are responsible. So that's another thing that we really truly focus on. Are there any questions about this slide? If not, I need to see somebody shake a head or something. Give me some indication. All right, cool. We're good. Excellent. All right, next slide, please. And I'll turn it back over to Judith.
Okay, so the next will be asked for your mission statement. And you're not always asked for about vision and purpose, but we wanted to bring this to bear right early on, because often it's confused in terms of what your mission is and your vision and your purpose is, and they aren't to be used interchangeably. So just the basic definition, your mission is your current purpose, and it outlines what it does and who it serves currently. An example of this is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful, right? Your vision, however, looks towards the future. It defines your long-term aspirations and your desired future state. Example, to provide access to the world's information in one click. And then your purpose is a declarative sentence that summarizes the main goal or topic of your project or your organization. So for instance, we found Kroger's purpose is to feed the human spirit. So later on, one of the things we'll be working on the breakouts will be your mission, which is describing your purpose and outlining what it does and who it serves. And we basically do that in terms of answering 3 of the 5 whys. Who are you? What do you do? And why are you doing that? So hold on that point, because we will come back to having an exercise where you can write on that. And actually using any AI, ChatGPT or others are really helpful in this day and age in terms of not writing what you're doing for you, but to help clarify who you are, what you do, and why you do it. Any questions or confusion or wanting further clarification about the difference between the 3 and why that's important to know? You guys are rock stars. Anybody? You got this? Okay, next slide.
Oh, I have a question before you move on.
Sure.
So because you all started off talking about the difference between the Envisioning Justice grants, which we can state is a little bit more simpler, can you describe what this would look like for a more comprehensive grant that you would apply for? What would be the differentiation between one that is simple compared to one that's complex or more comprehensive when they ask for this information?
Absolutely. Great question. Thank you, Tony. I can take this one, Judith, if that's
sure.
cool. So yeah, and some of I mean, if you think about like larger state or federal applications, or even some very complex foundation applications, they ask you these things too, because they want to know your organization. These type of questions also lead up to some interviews that they may want to do with you. For instance, they may actually say, hey, we like this one. We should bring them in and see if they can clarify a little bit more, because that way you're actually building a relationship with that foundation or whoever the donor is. It's not necessarily like you're going to do interviews with the state and federal grants at that time, but what they do is help to clarify. Think about like all the different people and agencies that will apply for different grants. They all could be great, but maybe your mission and your vision statement actually show an impact of a much larger, pool of people, a much larger population that can be serviced. And maybe your mission and your vision aligns with the purposes and the mission and vision of the organization that's funding this. That's really like a feather in your cap, if you will. So there's purpose and meaning behind actually writing, the mission vision statement, because you're actually showing them, we've thought this through. We know what we're doing, and everything that we do is going to lead us right back to the point of the mission and vision and statements that we have. Does that help a little bit, Tony, you think?
I think that helps a lot because we often receive questions about narratives. So if Judith can go and follow up with what you stated about the state and federal agencies, because a lot of smaller organizations, when they start thinking about their narratives and redefining, what it looks like to represent a particular work when it has been reconceptualized. So we have some words that are loaded and you can no longer use. So
Right.
in this climate now, where, for example, we look at DEI, how does that affect people's narratives when their mission statements were already in place before the new administration? So how do they move forward with trying to do this particular work, but not necessarily knowing how to structure their language to still meet their mission statement? So I will ask Judith that question.
Yeah. Well, and Keyria and I were just talking about this. I mean, there are like 114 words that are now banned as part of DEI. So I don't know what all those words are, but I think it's just one, knowing what those are. But I think we all talk about narrative change and framing narratives and reframing narratives. And I think for both your mission statement as well as your purpose, which I was going to add on to that, one of the reasons that any funder that you're applying to is going to ask for your purpose of wanting to know, does what you want to do with a particular project fit your mission, let alone does it fit their mission? So that's very important to see that it's very much in tune with that. But I think since all of us that work in this area of social justice, we are also, and even if you're not a media organization like what I work with, we're always working against the dominant narrative that has penalized or made more punitive those of us who are not in the dominant narrative. So I think one, being aware of the words that are banned, but finding out how it is that determining what it is that you're doing that opens up opportunities for individuals who have been negatively stigmatized or discriminated against, that you're demonstrating a part of the human population, the American population, to have a voice and have actions towards justice, that I think that even just using those basic words are ways to craft your mission statement or your narrative about who you are. But I encourage you to find ways to say, and we are doing this in this way that will change this narrative by these things. So what is it you're doing that's going to have raise awareness or bring a spotlight to people or situations that have not been treated fairly in the culture or by the media, that your work and your project is giving people who have been stigmatized or disrespected or excluded an opportunity to do something that is for the benefit of themselves and others. And I think, this is just me talking, that using those very basic words on justice will help all of us get around, be able to pursue funding without getting in trouble with all of these words that are now banned.
Yeah, and I'll jump in just a little bit too, and I'll just say, like, keep in mind, although there are, it's an executive order, right? And everybody's still trying to figure out really what these words are. I've seen many different lists. The one that Judith and I were talking about were just the one that I've seen with the largest amount, which is the 114. But that doesn't mean every organization is a federal organization that you might apply to, right? So they could still have different rules about how they do things, but it's just, in this case, we're just letting everybody know the safest thing to do, use as many synonyms as possible. It's like Judith said, going back to the basics with many of the words, but use as many synonyms as possible. If you have to break out AI tools for that, so be it. But use as many synonyms as possible. Are some agencies going to completely change their mission and vision statements? That's completely up to them. I mean, if they want to continue to pursue different types of funding opportunities, they may have to consider using synonyms as well, because rules are rules, right? But it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. We don't have all the answers for that, because everybody's going through this at the same time, but definitely using those synonyms is even what I've had to do for other grants that I've written here recently.
Exactly. Any questions about that very important part of what can we say and what can't we say? Or anybody have a word that you want to throw out there and see if we think it's a way to reframe it? I mean, other than the federal agencies, like I've gotten advice from development people that I'm working with to not even try to apply to the National Endowments of the Arts because they're so heavy in terms of what you cannot say or what you cannot do. But it's certainly in terms of locally and smaller and the private foundations and the public foundations that are not the federal. I haven't seen yet where they've changed their mission statements or their applications in terms of what's no longer allowable. Any questions, comments, additions? Okay, then I'm gonna turn it back to Keyria for the slide that's currently up. Does your organization have the following?
Perfect. So consider these bullet points that we're about to discuss next as you think about, I mean, we just talked about, some of the words that could be banned. So synonyms are important, everyone. But think about the data project in particular, right? Think about when you think about the data project, what population are you considering? What type of data are you collecting? And if you, be honest, I need to ask this question, show of hands, either use your emojis or just use your actual hand. I'm going to be careful with this. How well do you think your agency is collecting and tracking data? If you think that you're doing a great, moderate to great job, go ahead and show me your hands or give me a little emoji. If you think that it can improve, put like a crying emoji in the chat, something like that. If you think you need to do something a little bit better, just be honest. Okay, see, I see a few of this. All right, very good. And you know what? This is just called honesty, right? Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, this is why we talk about this part, right? And with the data, we find that many organizations, this has been something that we just haven't done so well, right? We might be able to hit our little check boxes when we report, for different grants and things that we have, but it doesn't quite tell the story that we want to tell. So that's when you want to think about like what other types of data you might be able to collect. And I'll give you just an example. If you're doing something with after school programs, maybe the kids are attending the after school programs, which is fantastic, but is it really helping anything, right? Like maybe you can show that grades have improved. That's wonderful. That's obviously the goal, right? But how many of the kids have been able to say, I can study more because I have stable housing? Like things like that. It's just, are you able to collect this kinds of data that you want to collect to help tell your story? Because the data portion is actually a huge piece of your narrative, huge piece of your narrative, right? I always get a little nervous when I see data project or any narratives that don't have data in there. I get a little nervous when I read those. So think about the data because again, it demonstrates the need. I'll give you an example. In a specific school district that I was basically doing some analysis for, I learned that their truancy rates are 3 times, the state rate, but nobody knew it. All they knew is that kids were missing from, some of their school days, but they didn't know that their state rates were that their truancy rates were that bad. So having examples like that, the very first sentence that I would write for the narrative is, this particular school district is experiencing, 3 times the amount of the truancy rate as the state, something like that. Probably not necessarily in those words. It would be a little bit better, but still, you see what I mean? Like that first sentence is like, I call it the attention grabber. That very first sentence, I should know what I'm about to read, in terms of the rest of this application, just based on that first sentence. Okay. This also will help you formulate your strategic plan. Now that you told me what the issue and the problem is, what's the strategy really going to look like? How did you formulate this strategy? And where did the strategy come from? Is it coming from your heart because you're a good person? Or is it actually coming from you looking at some data for your area and actually seeing that, okay, yep, we've got a lot of red flags here. We got to focus on some things here, right? Again, data is important. Also, with whatever you're going to be designing, or maybe you already have a program that exists and you're looking for funding to help support it, how accessible is your program to everybody in, in your area or your target population? Can they get to you? Do they have a way to get to you? Like, how have you been able to control for that? Like, if they don't have transportation, but you have the service they need, what's the plan for making sure that people can receive from you? Right? So it's thinking about things like that. Again, a lot of banned words here: accessibility, diversity, equity, inclusion, like a lot of banned words on this slide, but it's just for the purposes of helping to, to do this training. But even with your statement about diversity, equity, and inclusion, there are some grants that you don't get that grant if you don't have a statement about DE&I, right? Again, that's going to change, and we're very well aware of that. But they wanted to at least make sure that you were controlling for, different types of barriers, also a banned word, barriers that people are not able to get over, like just hardships that they've experienced. But yet again, you might have that amazing program that would help them. Does that make sense so far? Okay, there we go. Looking at the faces here. Also, financial. Oh, yes, we do. We do have a link. Thank you, Audrey, for your question. We do have a link that we can provide for you. I'll make sure that the team has that entire list so that you can see it. And it's sad that I've got it almost memorized, but I do. And so again, doing a lot of writing. So another part of this are one other thing that we should definitely mention is the financial audit piece, right? When we are talking about financial audits, and Judith and I were discussing this as we were putting this together for you, there are some organizations and agencies that will give you funding without having to see these. But if you're talking about going for the big bucks, you will need these. mainly because, again, with the trust thing, they want to make sure that they can trust who they're giving money to. They will ask you for your financial audits. They will ask you for receipts. They need copies. They will ask you for these things. But again, it's to make sure that if we're going to give you $100,000, we want to make sure that you know where the $100,000 is going to go, but also that you can accurately report this for your own books, not that you're just getting a grant and not reporting it, right? They want to make sure that you are also doing this as well. And they will not even, I've actually spoken to a few foundations myself. Well, they will say things like, we love the mission, we love the vision, we love the purpose, but they've not had anybody to check their records and their books, and that we can't do. Does that make sense? Okay. Again, this also depends on the amount of money that you will try to receive. If you go over a certain amount, again, the audits are important. What I tell everyone is that I don't care how large or small the amounts are that you're going for. If you have the opportunity to get an audit done, a professional audit done, do so, because you'll then be building that history. Showing that you've done an audit every year, every 2 years, every 3 years. You know what I mean? Like you want to be able to show them that you have that history, and that they can trust you, and that you make sure your audits are done, so that you can tell your story and also feel confident in showing them, hey, well, I told you guys we didn't have enough money, but we want to be able to do all these other things. So with your financial support, we're asking you for this much because you see, we don't necessarily have enough that we can play with. Also, your full budget that you have available for your agency right now, your operating budget, you can't ask for more than a certain amount based on your operating budget too. And so that is actually an IRS rule. So there are some things to think about for that as well. Okay, so when we talk about knowing and understanding your audits, your budgets, it's very critical. The other thing that I'll mention here is the agency collaboration and the partnerships. And don't get me wrong, we all, have our certain agencies and partners that we love to work with. You have some new ones that will pop up and you want to try to give them opportunities. But I will say this to you, make sure that all of your agencies and partnerships that you do collaborate with, first of all, you understand the mission and the vision of what, this grant is for, but also make sure that your agencies and partners have clean books too. Because if you're showing them that you are going in partnership with them and somebody else has all these other red flags going on in their history, that could be a few points off for you, right? And I don't mean in a grant application, I mean a few points off for other things. So you just want to make sure that this is as clean and clear as you can possibly get it. And again, for a lot of the grant applications, some of this stuff would be optional. But if you want to prepare, and I use football analogies a lot, sports analogies, if you want to prepare to actually score a goal, you need to make sure you go to practice. So, make sure you can perform. So even if you're not going for a super large grant right now, still get used to doing some of these things.
Yeah. And the only thing I like to add about the financial audits is because it is expensive and intimidating. And if you're a smaller organization, the requirement or you're looking at a fiscal sponsor, the requirement for a financial audit is if you have a budget of $500,000 or more in the year, or you have $750,000 or more of federal funds. So if you do not have that amount, you're not required for the audit, even though it's preferred that you do, but audits can be quite pricey. And if you have a smaller budget, you can submit with a 990 if you're a nonprofit, which is your tax return statement, or have a fiscal sponsor who is large enough that does have an audit. And I've been told you can also have a financial review, which is a little less expensive than an audit. But ideally, we're all striving to be the place where we can have the amount of assets to be able to do audits. But that is, again, as Keyria said, is looking, are you financially sustainable to receive new monies?
Yeah.
We have a question from Beck. So Beck has a question for you.
Yes, thank you. This is already so useful. Thank you both so much. And the question I have that I imagine might apply to other people here too is that, so we started as a very informally run grassroots volunteer organization, and we didn't really intend to get big. So at the start of our history, we weren't meticulously tracking, like, you know, all of our donations that we received and things like that. And now we are fiscally sponsored and we are trying to kind of formalize ourselves more. So I think what I'm wondering is that something we should be prepared to explain? And what are the things we should have in mind?
A fantastic question. Do you want to go for it, or do you want me to take it?
You go first and I'll follow up.
Okay. Great question, Beck. Thank you for asking that. And I'm sure others had kind of the same questions too. I get that a lot, actually. And so, yes, you definitely want to be able to explain that. But to your point, tracking it all now from like right now, and being able to even kind of give a ballpark of what you think, you know, the figures had been in the past is fantastic. You just want to make sure you have that written, and make sure that if you have accountants, make sure they have that information, because you might need to reference that, right? And so if people ask you about it, I've seen interviews, been in interviews where foundations will ask the potential recipient, yeah, well, what happened in your first 2 years? Well, so yeah, it's kind of those situations. But yes, if you can track all that, that would be great. And it just referencing what had happened from, you know, what happened from the beginning to where you are now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Same thing with the data. Same thing with the data.
Yeah, I agree. Because my organization did that recently. We were first fiscally sponsored by a larger media company, and then went through 2 years of transitioning while we were applying for 501c3. And on all of our grant applications, we spoke about that relationship with them, and then why we were trying to become our own nonprofit as well. So literally spelling all that out as specifically and clearly as you can totally helps in terms of justifying why you are growing and why you are looking to expand your mission and your operations.
Okay, awesome. Thank you both. That's really helpful. So it sounds like really just as long as you're being as transparent as you can, that's what
Absolutely.
people are looking
Yes.
for. Okay, great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Problem. Great question.
Okay, I think next slide. Maybe. Project narrative for orgs and individuals. So this again, we're looking at both sides, whether you're an organization or an individual. Again, in your narrative, you're going to have your history. Again, it's who you are, what you do, and why you're doing it. And really, really importantly, in what ways are your mission and programming related to the arts, the humanities, and addressing the impact of mass incarceration. And I've made this mistake of not looking and answering exactly as what the question is asking. So what are you doing that's related to the creative production as a creative production that you're doing? What are you doing that's speaking to the public humanities in terms of the values that we hold dear as humans? And then what are you doing that's addressing the impact of mass incarceration? So do not do what I've done in the past, which is try to answer this in one long sentence. Break down specifically what you are doing that's addressing these 3 areas. And if you are not addressing one of those areas, say why. And then equally important is any significant collaborations that you have with other organizations. It may not be financial, but it may be that you're working together on this project to do X. Because again, anything that you're doing that's working with other organizations or other individuals is justifying the significance of your program and its ability to be extended further. Excuse me. And then for individuals, they're interested in the background that leads people to this work. And then describe your own personal and professional trajectory as it relates to the criminal legal system. And then feel free to share any past experiences, education, and positions that have fostered your interest in this topic. And again, so this is not your life story that's being asked here, but what it is that you have experienced in your life that has led you to want to do this program that's going to impact people who have been impacted by the criminal legal system. So only thing I can emphasize over and over again is answer the questions specifically and do not omit any part of the question, because there are actually points recorded for what you are and how you are answering. So take your time with this, particularly in the what ways are your mission and programming related to the arts, the humanities, and addressing the impact of mass incarceration. And I will repeat what seems obvious, because this grant app, this particular one is looking specifically at how or what you're trying to do, what you're doing, meet the mission that we have for this Envisioning Justice grant. But any other application that you're going to apply for any other foundation or funder is going to also ask you similar words of, are you meeting the requirements of why we are established to have this kind of programming or projects done? Any questions about that? And it's particularly for anybody, excuse me, that's my bird clock, particularly from anybody who's considering applying as an individual. Are there any questions here in terms of how do I write about my past experience that also leads to why I feel justified in applying for these funds? Or is that pretty self-explanatory in terms of how you'll see it on the grant application?
Give us some hands up if you're good, thumbs up.
Exactly.
Okay,
Wave a finger, nothing.
awesome.
Cool. Next, and when we do the breakout, as a matter of fact, we will come back to the project narrative, in which you'll have 15 minutes to work on with your team, and what ways are your mission and programming related to the arts, the humanities, and addressing impact of mass incarceration.
All right, this one's mine, right?
Yep.
Cool. So it was just reflecting back on the previous slide. I just remember when I first got into grant writing, the only thing that my mentor and trainer kept saying, follow the guidance. I can't get that out of my head. I can't. Whatever guidance you're reading, like, in terms of writing for a grant, follow it to a T. All right. So follow the guidance. And she just screams at us. Okay. And so for project narrative, for organizations and individuals, we wanted to make sure to take some time to break this down for you, because in the past, some of the grant applications that we've received, this section could be a little stronger. And so as a group, we talked about making sure we could find ways to kind of break this down and walk through it. So the first thing I'll talk about is a basic project description. And as we go through this, if you're taking notes, if you're able to take notes, jot down some bullet points as you hear, us break this down, whatever you need to do to make sure that you are getting some thoughts on paper. Sometimes that's the hardest part, right? So the basic project description, what is this about? What is this for? Like, why do we even need to care? Right? That's what the basic project description is going to be about, right? So you're describing the purpose, the goal, even your goals and objectives if you need to go that far. I don't know. It depends on how much room you have in that section to write about, but what is it that you're planning to do? And I'll use a truancy prevention program as an example, right? We know that, and we understand that kids need to be in school to make sure that we don't, experience like people dropping out of school and getting into, a life of all kinds of other things. And sometimes life happens as well, right? And so what we want to do is find every way to make sure that kids are in school. So if they're experiencing hardship, barriers, all these other things, again, barriers is a banned word, but all these other things, we are going to make sure that our program is touching every one of these areas. The goal is to make sure to keep kids in school, right? So I'm just giving a very basic skeleton overview. Also, we have with the approximate project timeline, like give them a timeline. If it takes 6 months to plan for something and another 12 months to actually like implement everything, say that. Don't ever leave it to the funder to try to guess how long this might need to take. That's actually a pretty dangerous thing, because to them, it may only need to take you a month. Why do you need a whole year? Right? So you want to give them that timeline, but it also shows by you giving them and I usually do this in a chart, showing them who's responsible for something, and how long it's going to take to get it done. It can turn into a logic model a little later on too, right? If the portion of this timeline. But the point of that is to say to them, we have done the math. We know that we're asking you for a certain amount of money. Here's how much it's going to cost to do this. And we can calculate that by month, how much it's going to cost to do this, right? And so like with your timeline, you're showing that you thought this through. And that you also have, if there are more than 1 or 2 people involved in this, everybody's got a specific role here, and here's what we're going to do. Here's who's responsible. And it'll take us until June 30 to get all of this done. So make sure that you are showing them the timeline. Any partnerships involved, those of you that work with, other agencies, you're collaborating with them, which always looks great, by the way. But if you're collaborating with them, make sure you show, here's their involvement in this project. We don't have them in the application just because we're friends. We have them in this application because they have a huge piece of this pie. Or we know that we can't exactly do the type of work that we want to do without them. Or maybe it's a situation where they already do this kind of work, but you and your agency, or if you're an individual, you're going to help them do it a little better. And you all have talked about this and everybody's on board with this. So it's just a way of showing what that collaboration looks like. Also, list the tangible deliverables that you will that basically will result from this project. Using my truancy example again, perhaps you will see truancy decrease by 25% for every person that's enrolled in your program, right? You'll see grades improve. You will see, maybe young people are not getting suspended so much out of school. Maybe, they're actually going to school, as a result of coming through your program. So, I mean, there's all kinds of things that you can think of here, but we anticipate that we will see a total truancy reduction for this population, for this age group or this grade level by 25% from this time to this time. Does that make sense so far? Cool. All right. And then how does this project use the arts and the humanities to address the issue of mass incarceration? How does this propel conversation? And how does this really help envision a truly just society, right? So somebody, just a pop quiz thing. Somebody tell me, those of you that are actually paying attention, is it safe to, well, actually, I'm gonna ask you, how would you address this question? How would you do this? How would you do this? How would you address this? Are we going all in one sentence? Are you breaking this down? How are you breaking this down? I hope you guys are actually specific. Okay, I see you. Thank you. Thank you, Letitia. Specific. Breaking it down. Okay. All right. Because how many parts in here do you see that you need to address? How does this project use? How many different parts are they asking you for in that one question? I see 3. Let's see who's paying attention. Promise you we love you, but we just want to make sure that you are listening.
Exactly.
See Tony's hand.
Yes, I have a question. As you are asking that, in your experience of reading grants and writing grants, because this says 1, 2, 3, this is 5 bullets. And then in your last bullet, it may be 2 to 3 different breakdowns.
Yes.
What advice would you offer grant writers about how to write a cohesive grant and not just 5 different answers to questions as if they are isolated components of a grant, but having some type of continuity to connect in the same storyline? So they are not like how you just asked the question, and someone say, "Oh, I answered this question, I answered those questions. Why didn't I receive a grant?" But they did not realize that there was either a stream of consciousness or that it was disjointed. So can you speak into that?
Yes, great point. Very great point. So with this type of question, it is a loaded one, right? And I heard 3, I heard 7, like, so there's all kinds of pieces in here. So to his point, we're not asking you to come up with 7, extra projects here. That's not what this is. What you would do, and I'll just give you this example as we go through this one. How does this project use the arts and humanities? First of all, break those down, right? What kind of arts? Maybe you have a theater project that you're trying to create or that you want to, actually get support for. Maybe it already exists and you want to get support for it to do something different. So we're going to talk about theater, right? And we're going to talk about humanities in that maybe it's whatever kind of project this is, it's definitely, a portion of what we would deem as, humanities. Again, you got to look these things up, make sure you know the definitions too. And then the third thing here is addressing mass incarceration. So to start my sentence, I know that I'm going to do something with theater, and maybe I'm doing something with theater students because we're in arts. For humanities, it's going to be focusing on, helping people to understand what they've been through and how it may not be the end of their life or end of their stories, right? And then also how to address the issue of mass incarceration, because the population could be people coming home, returning home, right? Returning home from where, where they've been. And then maybe we want to help them create dialogue with others who have been through similar situations. So that would be propelling the conversation. And to envision a truly just society in this case, the rest of my sentence would be so that everybody can understand it, everybody involved will have a better understanding of how to, not only work with others, but to begin to trust where they are, trust their environment so that they can get things done again, but also to feel connected to that community again. And I know I broke that all down, but that is one sentence.
Yeah. And actually, it also is, I find all 5 of these points are really helpful in just your project description. We're doing this for these reasons. It's going to help these people recognize this. One of the things that's like theming is broken down is like, to your point, Tony, you don't answer yes, no, 7, whatever. That it really gives you an opportunity to really look at the good work you're doing and how do you describe that to somebody very, very simply in a short amount of time. So it's almost like thinking about an elevator speech, an elevator pitch, right? So you're already doing this work. They're just asking to now frame it in a way that speaks specifically to the arts and humanities. How does it address mass incarceration, propelling conversation, and then your vision of envisioning a truly just society? So my suggestion is don't be thrown off by these, long questions and like, well, we don't talk like this. Of course you don't talk like this. But it really is an opportunity to wrap your head around what we're already doing and then how is what we're doing accomplishing these things. So it doesn't feel as disjointed when you're writing this, as well as, don't wait for the night before a grant is due, of course, to get the application in, because you won't have that time to kind of massage and think about, oh yeah, we are doing this, and this is how we are addressing these things, and this is how we are going to be able to know we're going to get this done in 6 months or 1 year or 3 weeks, and this is how we're involving our partners, and this is how we're going to know these are our deliverables that we know are going to have this kind of impact. Okay.
Any
And next slide. Yeah, any
sorry.
questions on that before we go forward?
And keep in mind, you're also going to get a copy of this recording. So even as we just broke down that last part of that sentence, go back and listen to that a few times. Make sure you got it. Okay.
Okay. And I see in the chat, you answered Audrey, the statement about statement of need, right? Okay. Does anybody else want to have any other further questions about statement of need? What that means? We'll come back to that. So anyway, next part of your project narrative will be your audience, right? Who are you doing this work for? Who's receiving it? So communities who you regularly serve through your work and how you reach them, the role your work plays in your community, any professional or community networks your organization is involved in with your programs, and are they accessible and available to the general public? And specifically inaccessible, how are the different ways that you're making getting your work out or your services out to the people you're trying to serve? If people are incarcerated, you may not be able to reach them through social media or other forms of media. I mean, how are you reaching people who have limited availabilities to different types of media that we're using now? And whether there are members of the target audience involved in your program planning, meaning the people that you're serving, are they also involved in this program so that you know for certain that you're meeting a need? And then what efforts will you make for, as I said earlier, for your programming to be accessible? Any questions about this? And again, we will reiterate over and over, like answering each of the questions as they come up in terms of, or the note, everything that's being asked is really important here. Pretty self-explanatory? Okay, next slide.
Okay. So we're going to talk about documentation and evaluation. We already touched on the data part. So, so this is where we're going to get into just breaking this down a little bit more. For organizations, this is like talking about how you'll define the success of your program or the project. And let me break this down just a little bit, because it's actually the same for individuals too. For you, is success basically just when somebody gets through the program and they're like done? Like, okay, they did everything we said to do, they're done. Or is success where you can actually see or experience someone's like totally changing? So using a juvenile justice program, I'll give you, my example here. We used to have a youth diversion program that only looked at whether or not somebody went through the program. And it was like, okay, checkbox, checkbox, checkbox. Great. That means they're successful, right? They did their community service. They did, the apology letter, blah, blah, blah. And then they were done. But if you get into research and you start breaking some things down, that's not really success. That just means they got through your program. Success means and many other people, because it's a construct, basically success just means that did we help them, basically get to a point of where they could change their mind about something, change behavior about something. To me, that's success. But how do you capture that? What does that look like? So then that's when you come up with survey instruments and things like that you'll give to people. If you're doing anything with assessment tools, you can see if there's a change in their assessment levels. Is this making sense so far? Okay, right? So success, one of the things that you want to be able to do for any Illinois Humanities grant is to be able to talk about it, to be able to say what success looks like for you and your team, how you all came up with this. Is it just that somebody is going to be able to watch the play? Like I was talking to someone earlier about wanting to do Shakespeare, right? Is it just that everybody is able to see the play? Is that success? Or is it that everybody can come away with something from, watching and experiencing this play, such as learning new languages and things like that? So like that's the kind of thing you want to be able to define when you are writing this. Second bullet point, like this is also about how you're going to determine if your project was successful in meeting its goals. Maybe the goals, perhaps one of them you had is that you might want to, oh, thank you. Yes. Maybe one of the goals is that you wanted to have 40 people to attend the play. I'm just going to use that one as an example. Well, you did have 40 people to attend, so that's great, and that actually answers bullet point number 2, right? But bullet point number 1 and 2 are not the same. Do you guys see that? They're not the same. Bullet point number 3. Any evaluation or documentation methods that you use, make sure that you can talk about these and how you're going to measure the success. So like if you're going to be given surveys to every participant coming through your program, to be able to, basically measure success in terms of not only them completing a program, but also things that they've learned from you during their tenure with you. Then yes, like that's the kind of stuff that you want to be able to document. For instance, you can have a young person by testimony walk up to you and say something like, if I didn't have this program, I would have been lost. Well, there's no bullet point for that. So you're going to have to document, basically what that looks like. And you need to be able to say that in your narrative when you get ready to report this, right? And so other things like bullet point number 1, 2, 3, 4. Any plans to use any kind of outside evaluator? So maybe you have university partners that you work with, or maybe you have other agencies that you collab with, and they are like, okay, well, we weren't part of the grant, but we can evaluate it for you to help you see whether or not you met your goals, to help you understand if there are some things you need to still do to capture what it is you proposed you were going to be doing in order to get this money. So that's all, part of this. And you see at the very bottom there, that bullet point is just talking about interviews, photography, videos, archiving the work, like all the ways in which you can capture how, this is going to look, and how you can then begin to talk about what you've done. And then the other part of this is understanding in terms of evaluation. Like, here's all the things that we were able to do in this grant. We're now evaluating, and let's say we circle back around a year from now. Do we need to do anything different? Maybe we learned from this first year that we don't quite want to do it this way again because we didn't really capture everything we needed to the first time. So now let's tweak it. So then if you get the opportunity to write another grant, you would say things like, we learned in year 1 that it doesn't quite work this way. So in year 2, we're going to do this instead. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Cool.
One of the things that I found was really helpful in writing grants was getting over this feeling that that your evaluation has to show the program is successful without saying, we had to tweak this, we didn't know this when we went in, now we know this, but to show that there's growth in terms of how you've adjusted your program to be more effective is much more effective and much more what the grant readers want to see than you saying, oh yeah, we got this, we did it right. Yeah, nobody showed up, but we knew it was right. Because I know on my team, we were very nervous the first couple of years of like, well, what if this doesn't work right? Is that gonna, change a funder's mind about coming back in with us? Where we found actually showing that we are actually being proactive and showing that we came up with this idea or this attempt, but we now made it a stronger program because we now have adjusted for what we didn't know going in. That I have found it has been much better to show how your evaluation has changed than to say we've always done it perfectly, because nobody believes that. Nor does it exist, I don't think.
Exactly. That's good.
Any questions about documentation and evaluation? Because that's a big deal.
Okay.
Okay,
And so
all right.
I will, before we take a break, give you all a 10-minute break. I just want to thank our presenters thus far for the information and the content, because a lot of you are already doing the work, but statistically, bigger organizations normally receive grants. And so, and some of the reasons is because of document evaluation and track records. And so, as you are thinking about being here today, the information, it may sound redundant, but it's the little things that matter. And also, as they are going through this, just want to put on the front of everyone's mind that this is actually components of the Envisioning Justice grants application. And so, as you are considering whether you would like to apply for the Envisioning Justice grant, as the portal open up, to be mindful that we are here to help you prepare yourself as well as your organization. And there is no question that is off the table that you may ask.
Okay, it's 6:32. I welcome everybody to rejoin us. Hope you had a chance to get a snack, dinner, something to drink, pet your dog, find your cat, say hello to your kids. Okay, then. So next slide, please. I think we've got everybody back. Budget. So we're going to spend just a little time here and then we'll do more of it in the breakout. But basically, budget for organizations and individuals. How will you use Illinois Humanities support and other support you will leverage to make this project happen? More than likely, because the funding is the grants are in the range of $10,000 maximum for organizations, $8,000 for individuals. Your program will probably need more money to get it together. So what other support are you bringing to the project is important to have, as well as to specifically talk about how the humanities support will be used, how you will use it in your program. We'll go to the next slide here, and then we'll answer questions after Keyria.
All right, perfect. So we have here, and we took this directly from the Illinois Humanities application, so that we can just sort of break this down and talk through any of these. And again, if you do have questions as we go through this, please feel free to either put it in the chat or raise your hand, and we will talk about it. So the first thing that I want to do is break down, again, this isn't like a huge pot of money that we're talking about, as you just heard Judith say, but still there's some ways to break down what you need for the budget. So we can play with an example of a $10,000 grant, right? Maybe that's the one you're writing for, 10 or 12, right? 10 or 12,000, I think it's 10.
10.
And so how will you propose to break this down? Think about whether you're going to have salaries for people. Maybe you have like a portion of a salary that you're going to give out, like $500 for, doing something, whatever it's going to be. We're going to talk about this more in the breakouts, but Are you going to have salaries for people? Or are you just going to have, since salaries, could be pretty expensive, maybe you're going to have honoraria instead, right? Maybe you bring in some guest speakers and you just give them honorarium, something like that, maybe a $500 honorarium, or, something. It just kind of depends on how you're going to do this. Travel and per diem. If you're going to be traveling somewhere, you're going to need mileage reimbursement. That would be something that you would want to write into this grant. And if you're going to be paying for, this person's lunch while they're on the clock, that is, or maybe even the dinner. I mean, it just kind of depends on how your organization wants to do this, but that would be the per diem. Or, if they're going to be staying in a hotel room somewhere because they're going to a conference or something like that. Like that's why we have that option of travel and per diem there. For promotion, so this could look like a couple of different things, really. But with promotion, you want to make sure that you break this down a little bit more. And Tony, correct me if I'm wrong here, but with promotion, we are really just kind of talking about ways in which you're not like getting somebody a salary increase from what the salary actually already is in their current budgets. That's not what we mean here, right?
Correct.
Yes. So, in this, Adam, do you want to break that down just a little bit for promotion, just to make sure I don't fumble?
So when you think about promotion, just think about whatever it takes for you to advertise your event.
Yeah.
So for example, you may put out flyers, you may take out a newspaper ad. And so just really thinking about the various ways there is to promote. And then, for example, if your audience um, maybe requires signing, and so you might want to pay someone or bring someone on who can can communicate that to that particular community, or um, if there are a particular type of special material that you need for whatever you are doing to reach a particular audience, then all of those are different guises that falls under there.
Thank you. Even with social media campaigns, same thing. Or if you're going to have bulk mail that you want to be able to mail out to people, again, you're promoting materials, but it has nothing to do with promotion of salaries. We can't do that part. So, all right. Program materials too. Breaking this down a little bit more as well. Maybe you actually found that maybe your agency has kind of blown through your supplies budget. So and you had to do that pretty quickly. So when you are talking about doing something specifically for Illinois Humanities, well, how much material, like printing paper, or maybe you need a printer itself, like what kinds of things do you actually need to carry out this project, this specific project? So that's the kind of stuff that you want to think about there. So moving up to the next bullet point, the supplies, the postage, telephone. This is, and I want to make this part clear since we're talking about like the specific budget for this project. You would not get supplies, postage, and telephone for all your other employees that have nothing to do with this project whatsoever. Like you wouldn't do that, right? You would be looking for like the supplies and postage to carry out this assignment. Does that make sense, everybody? Good there? Okay. Equipment, same thing. You would not buy with this grant necessarily, you would not buy a car for, like for everybody else in the agency to use. In terms of equipment, you're thinking about what you need to carry out this project. So if it's a laptop or something like that, or, an iPad of some kind, that's, kind of what we're talking about here. Facilities, well, we're obviously not buying a whole building with $10,000, right? We're not able to do that. But in terms of facilities, maybe there's like rent space that you have to pay for. If you're having or hosting an event somewhere that's not your actual location. So that would be something else to think of. And other, we have had people to use the other category because maybe what you need to do doesn't quite fit any others. But if you do have questions about whether or not those costs are allowed, you can always send the team an email to say, do you have a list of allowable costs or things like that? And someone from the team will be able to get back with you. Now we cannot tell you how to write the grant because that would obviously be not fair, but we can definitely help to let you know what's allowable and what's not.
Yeah.
Okay, so and then again, total the Illinois Humanities request. Now this is going to sound like I'm a teacher, but I promise you, this is something that you will have to do. Please make sure you do the math after you come up with all of the totals here. Make sure that your totals do add up and that you do not go over 10,000, because if that's what you're asking for, you do not submit a budget for over 10,000. Okay, so just being clear.
Exactly. And to underscore what Keyria said, I mean, let's say, for instance, your total program cost is around $35,000, right? So it was like, but 10,000 you're asking for Envisioning Justice. So it's really clear that, your percentage of your equipment and your facilities that's going to support this that doesn't exceed this 10,000, even though you're also demonstrating where the other 25,000 is coming from, because either your organization is supporting that or you have other grant funding supporting that. So literally just breaking this down as fine-tuned as possible, knowing that you probably will not be using this money for salaries ever, just for the amount, is something to remember, as well as adding up at the end so that it does add up to just the amount that you're asking for.
And to just piggyback and qualify where each of them have already stated, there are instances where individuals have already reached the end of whatever grant funding they have received from other organizations. So there may come times where a person may have already spent $300,000 or $400,000 for a project, and now they are at an end and they may need additional money to edit something. So as you are going through your budget breakdown, just be mindful also that you do not have to bring in other funders and how you have utilized other funders' money. So you may only be applying for a particular small section of whatever you are doing. And if you are someone that may be a bigger organization and you have worked with other bigger funders and you are at the end of whatever funding you have and you might just need a small portion to complete a project, then that's all we will ask of you in this section. And that's something that Mark can speak to at the end, but we get a lot of those questions for individuals who have received hundreds of $1,000 grants, but they are at the end and they have run out of money and they only need a small portion to complete their project. And sometimes they apply to Illinois Humanities for that portion of it. And Mark may speak more to that at the end. And I will give it back to Judith and Keyria.
Okay. Next slide. So then this is the additional information that you'll, as an individual organization, have to submit. And this is, again, we're specifically looking at a grant application for Envisioning Justice with Illinois Humanities, but much of these particulars you will also need for all the other grant applications you're going to put in, whether it's federal, private foundations, public foundations, smaller foundations. So if you are a 501c3 nonprofit charitable organization, you will need to list who your board members are, their names, their addresses, their contact information. You'll need your organization's W-9, or if you're an individual, your W-9, so that the funding will come to you and you'll get a 1099 at the end of the year, your organization's logo, and any promotional items that you have, photographs or whatever, that can identify who you are. That just helps to substantiate your request of, what you're doing and you have a presence and you want this grant to help you extend your presence with the work that you're doing. And I think that's it for our,
Yes.
yeah, questions. Please, everybody.
Any questions?
And if you could identify, if you can turn your cameras on at this point, it would be helpful for both of us just to see your faces. And any questions over anything we've done or said, or seems unclear or stupid, or this is the time. Okay, comments. Yes, Beck.
Thank you both again for the presentation. This is a really general question, but I'm kind of wondering if there are any sort of common pitfalls that you see in grant applications, whether it's in the way people go about the process or the actual application itself.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I'll start with this one. So yes, and I won't go through an exhaustive list here, but one thing that you can tell when you're reviewing some grants is when people run out of gas. And so So they may start out really strong, especially at the beginning of the narrative, and then the ideas just kind of stop formulating, and then before you know it, it's like a huge just drop. And they don't even try with the budget section. And it's like, well, we want to help, but we needed you to keep going there, you know, like, how did you arrive at these costs? Like, how did you get there? Like, are you making numbers up, or did you actually do some analysis to tell us how, you know, this cost that much, or where you got this figure from? How does this budget relate back to the project? Sometimes we get some really great projects and then the budget is like totally unrelated. We're like, wait, what? So that happens sometimes, right? And so it's I could go into a list of common things that we typically see. I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in on that.
Well, and as someone who writes grant applications, the biggest problem is not giving yourself enough time to really go back and not wait till literally the 12th hour before it's due or the night that it's due to start and try and finish. That usually the running out of the steam part is because you know the deadline is 11:59 p.m. and it's 10 p.m. Is really looking at each grant application as something that's going to take several hours or days to work on. And then as you have these core components created, a lot of the material that you're putting in any individual grant application can be used with some modifications on anything else you're using. So you're not always starting from scratch each time. So it's mostly like, make sure you give yourself enough time to know that everything you put in, you've read through it, it's added up, and you feel good about it.
And I would add copy and pasting. So individuals who have been turned down last year, and someone may say apply next year, they take the same exact information from the previous year, copy and paste it in, and you see the exact year and date from the previous year. They have not proofread it, they just drop the same information in. And so to go off of what Judith stated, it's one thing to expand and revisit your grant without necessarily looking to recycle the whole idea at a 100%, because times change, conditions change, circumstances change. So where you may have first developed an idea and a concept, it's always good to revisit it for the nuances instead of just stating, I was told this was really great and to resubmit this next year, but you didn't actually sit down to see which should be changed. So I would think that's one of the greatest pitfalls. And the second one is that individuals write 6 different grants in one application. So for example, if you start at the top, they will write one thing and then they go to another section and they write another section, but they don't really look at how what they are talking about in this section correlates to the previous section. And so that is one of the things, or the primary 2 things that I have noticed.
If I can
I
jump in.
just, I'm sorry, Mark. Go
Oh,
ahead.
go for it, Tia. No, you go.
No, I was just gonna say, I was really feeling the answer to question 1 because I'm only a recent grant reader since the past couple of years, but that's my biggest thing. When I was reading them, you didn't really answer the question, or you didn't get enough information. And because I'm just a nosy person, I will go look the information up and try to help the application because I really want to fund it. So I'll go look, but I can tell you 95% of the readers are not me, and they're not going to do that. So just want to throw that out there.
I totally agree with what Tia just said. And just to add on, I mean, I would say that overall we get a lot of really thoughtful, well thought out, holistic proposals, meaning the pieces actually fit together, right? And that's really encouraging to see. What I would add is that I think when you're writing a proposal, assume that the person on the other side really knows nothing about you. And so back way up, it's not like you're sitting talking to an old friend and you go, here's what I want to do, 3 events. No, you gotta articulate who you are, what you bring to the table, why it's special, how it's special, your background, your knowledge, your partnerships, the things that you bring that are going to make this project really fly are unique. And so I think if I had one little thing to say, I think that would be it. to really back up and remember. And I don't mean to say sell yourself. It's not just selling yourself. It's explaining who you are and what you bring, and also don't be afraid to be modest. You might not change the whole world with your project. You might change the lives of 3 people, and that would be huge. So anyway, so that's one thought.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Thanks. Any other questions or comments? Come on. I know you're thinking something.
I just put in the chat, I call it like the tug, right? Like
Mhm.
tug at my heart and my mind. Like, I don't care what the project is even about. Like, tug at my heart, tug at my mind, make me think. Make me want to know more. So I call it the tug.
Mhm. And to your point, Tia, I mean, definitely writing to what's been asked is critical, right? I mean, even if you have a fabulous, and I'm thinking in my own experience, description of who you are and what you think this project is, if it does not speak specifically to the question, that's not a good thing. Because they're like, wait, that's wonderful. It's beautifully written, but it is not what we're asking here.
And I think another pitfall that I've seen is that people think that they've answered the question already, so they just repeat what they just wrote. And I'm like, no, this is a different question. If you didn't understand, clearly you didn't because you think you are answered it already. Call somebody and ask. Do not be afraid to call, to email. We do respond. I can't speak to other organizations, but we do respond.
All right, well, if there's no other questions or comments or anything, let's go to breakout. Thank you.
And that will allow me to present you with some of our publications. So we have the Envisioning Justice Reaction Curriculum Guide. We have the Envisioning Justice Reaction Workbook, and we have a digest that goes out bi-monthly. All of these resources are free. The Envisioning Justice Reaction Curriculum Guide can be downloaded, as well as the Envisioning Justice Reaction Workbook at free of cost. And if you would like to receive the Envisioning Justice Digest, you could just email, join our mailing list, and request to be added to the mailing list through the Envisioning Justice Digest. Whenever we find out about other grant opportunities outside of Illinois Humanities, we insert those grant opportunities within our digest. Some of the great work that you are describing, Beck, if you had an interest and needed extra promotion, you can feel free to email us some of the work that you are doing and state, hey, can you send this out to your readers? So we are also a conduit for our partners to be able to collaborate and share some of the work that they are doing. As Keyria stated in the beginning, we love to highlight the work that individuals are doing. You can follow us on social media. So, you know, some ways to engage and to keep the conversation going and understanding what does it mean to be humane and civil is to be able to engage in civil discourse. We don't have to agree with each other, but we do have to be able to understand each other's different perspectives and points of views in order to grow as a society. Um, and, you know, if you want to learn more, here's a QR code. But before we close out, really like to thank you, Beck, for taking the center stage, the front stage, for being so open, honest, and vulnerable in this moment. Also like to thank Judith and Keyria for the time and effort they put in to prepare this presentation, because believe it or not, they put in a lot of hours, a lot of time and dedication. Like to thank Tia for the some of just the nuanced information that is really important that people just don't know what they don't know. Would like to thank the grants director, Mark Hallett, because again, he can answer questions across the board about all of the grants for Illinois Humanities. When you receive an email within no later than the end of next week, we will provide a copy of the recording. We will provide additional grant information outside of Illinois Humanities, and we will provide our email. So if any questions come up, you can feel free to email any one of us, and we will answer your questions to the best of our ability. If at the time the grant portal opens and you have trouble with found it, we will also provide a contact for you there. So we look to partner with you not only in the beginning and the infancy of your grant, we look to partner with you throughout your journey to change the world. And I will leave it there just in case Mark or any of our facilitators have anything to say.
Not really, Tony. Thank you so much, Beck and Evangelina. And I would just say thank you. It's been wonderful to learn more about your work. I really like something that Keyria was saying earlier, that remember that proposals are hard to pull together, right? But pull those things together and keep them in a folder, in a real folder or in a digital folder, so that the next one you look at, you already have, you know, your organizational history. Maybe you want to tweak it for a different funder, but you have all those pieces there, and you start to just have a little collection of the pieces that'll help you into the future. And in all seriousness, don't hesitate to reach out to us with any questions as you're going through the process. That's what we do. That's what we're here for. So don't hesitate at all.